Hello, welcome back to another FMB Talk, hosted by me as your guest host, Peggy Lee. I am the managing partner of Strategic Partnership Solution. We are a service-centric driven consultancy with my personal background of 18 years Michelin star restaurant experience of both Europe, Far East, and Middle East now. I have worked across the line with chefs such as Joël Robuchon, Arthur Kutcher, and Gordon Ramsay, just to name a few. So the F&B talk is very much about a knowledge sharing basis on helping people who are wanting to start a business in F&B, as well as for current proprietors to learn and explore and understand what else can they do better. And the whole aim of it is to assist, or to say help each other with holding hands to elevate everyone's business together to meet the palate and expectation to come. So I have such a great pleasure to welcome Sama as my series talk interviewee for this series. So this series is about the boom of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia's food and beverage industry. Welcome, Sama. Thank you so
Thank you.
much to accept my interview. And
Oh, my
I
pleasure.
have to
Thank you so
say,
much for having me.
it is so much fun. And I am a great fan of your restaurant, Akiba
Thank you so
Dori.
much.
So, first question is Design District. What a curious place that you have picked to kick that place off. It's always been on
Yes.
my head. Please explain to me about the logic and explain to me why. Because obviously that place is, is very much a day place. So the
hmm
evening scene, how do you balance the trade? How do you attract the people? It's like a mystery to me. Please.
Okay. Well, so obviously, I've been doing this for quite a long time, and Akiba Dori is my first restaurant that I've created. I've exclusively done bars and clubs in the past, and for those, I never had a problem with location. For me, at least for me personally, I never relied on PR agencies or promoters or kind of third party organizations to help me draw a crowd in. I did everything myself. So to say I'm a bit more, I was a bit more confident about saying I could put my brand anywhere and people will come. D3, for me, it was a community decision more than a location decision, if that makes any sense. The only other communities that exist that are like D3 are Dubai Media City, Internet City, that cluster, and then DIFC. So the brand really didn't fit Media City and Internet City from a vibe perspective. It's a bit too disoriented there. There's too many um, differences, if you will, between the two areas of Internet City and Media City, and DIFC was at the time very difficult to get into, very expensive to get into, and it was
Not
more of
about
a
the
high
difficult
end.
bit. It's still the very expensive part still exists, as we know.
It's easier now. I mean, it's been easier, let's say, for the last 2 years, even pre-COVID. A lot of things have changed, and I think the market has matured a little bit. And I think landlords have matured a lot, which is very good, which is always a very good indication, because the last thing we needed was another decade of delusional landlords who think their development is the best in the town and they can charge whatever they want. Yeah, I
We
mean,
get
those
cash shower,
that's a
baby, cash
pipe
shower.
dream. Yeah, it wasn't a logical thing, and it wasn't something that was long lasting. It was very short term, and I think the last couple of years really proved that. Well, actually, since 2018. So D3 for me was, I was in love with the community of D3, the people that worked there, the people that created things there, the kind of agency vibes that were there. The whole fashion industry exists in D3, and generally speaking, they're the tastemakers of any city. It's usually the music scene, the culture scene, and the fashion scene. We don't have a film industry, unfortunately, here for me to say the film industry is part of that scene. But here, fashion is among the biggest in terms of the taste making community, and they're the best. I mean, the D3 community is amazing, from the management down to the tenants, to the employees, to the security guards, to the valet guys. I mean, it was amazing. And the ex executive director Mohammed Shahi, and the managing director at the time, Amran Shah, who are now have now left, obviously, they built a very strong base for D3 that's able to continue now, which is always a sign of a very healthy kind of landlord relationships. And uh, you know, the new management team have been pretty amazing as well with us, to be honest. And like I said, the community was the most important part of it. And yeah, I couldn't find that anywhere else. I didn't want to be in a mall right away, and I didn't want to be in a hotel for Akiba Dori. I didn't want to be at the mercy of a hotel manager or a hotel F&B manager who might look at me as competition, like has happened to me in the past. And it's a really funny situation to be in, and a lot of people are currently in it. And I could write a book about dealing with hotels in Dubai. Some good, some bad. So D3, like I said, it was a community decision. I felt like if I wanted to build a brand, which is what I care about more than anything else, because I'm not opening a business just to look at my bottom line. I have nowhere to go unless I build a brand. I have nowhere to franchise unless I build a brand. And the fastest way to build a brand is to get a loyal fan base. And if my loyal fan base can happen to be the tastemakers, then for me, I've struck gold. It was a struggle, obviously, because like you said, it's not a nighttime destination, even though there are two nightclubs there. Well, now there's just one. But nightlife was what I used to do, and I knew I could bring people at night. So if we got the lunch crowd, it was just an added bonus, and we managed to do both pretty well. Obviously, it's not busy every night, but weekends are pretty slammed, and it's amazing to see that you know there is a character.
Obviously, we all are still coming out, maybe still dragging ourselves out of the time warp of 2020.
Hmm. Hmm. It's
Tell
almost
us.
2022, so that should make you think.
I know.
Yeah.
But tell us, how has you, your business is doing right now? You know, after the restructuring, because obviously you decided to close it during the for a little while,
Yeah, for a
and
month. Yeah.
yeah, and then after the restriction now has been lifted in UAE, would you
Yeah.
say your business has now recovered back to the pre-COVID level? You haven't. Maybe you can give us just a little bit of snapshot how your business transition has been come come after till this point.
Okay. So I can't talk about any of that unless I talk about the kind of lucky situation we're in. And
Please go ahead.
I mean,
Spill the
I don't
beans.
I only call it luck because I could have gone to any city in the world when I decided to leave Lebanon after I did half my master's 17 years ago, and I decided to come to Dubai. If I had been anywhere else in the world, we'd be having a very different conversation. If I had stayed in Lebanon, we probably wouldn't have a conversation because there'd be no internet, no electricity, no power. So that's a completely different headache over there. So luckily and thankfully, we were in Dubai when a pandemic hit, when probably the worst economic crisis in modern history, I would say.
True.
Maybe our modern history. When I say, I don't mean like recorded history, because then you have to go to the 30s, you have to go to the 50s. But for our time, our generation, I mean, there's nothing as brutal has ever come across our generation. And from a business perspective, from a health perspective, I mean, it's been a brutal year. 2020 was horrible. I have a lot of friends who lost, their parents. They lost friends. We lost friends. I mean, it's been emotionally very difficult for everybody from that perspective because at the end of the day, we work to better our lives. So if lives are in danger, it's very difficult to see the justification of, oh, we're making a lot of money, but so it's kind of it was a very difficult time. I think mentally for a lot of people, and it continues to be emotionally for a lot of people, and it continues to be. From a business perspective, we're very lucky that Dubai handled the pandemic the way Dubai handled the pandemic. And I say Dubai because I need to single out Dubai because I don't know what it was like for people in Abu Dhabi for restaurants. It's been very well received, and it's been doing great financially. But I don't know how the Abu Dhabi the local government dealt with F&B. But I know Dubai. And I know Dubai because a couple of weeks ago, when I was out of town, I got a text message from my bank saying that money had been deposited and that it was from Dubai Tourism. So if you remember last year, there were a lot of announcements that came out saying we're going to support A, B, C, D businesses that have, we're going to refund things. And I'm not a fan of press releases, and I'm not a fan of grand announcements without action. And I will not call anybody out on it, but people know how I feel about it. Every single thing that was promised to us and said would and Dubai Tourism, Dubai Municipality, the ED, everyone involved in Dubai government said was going to happen happened, and we're still seeing it happen. So from that perspective, we got very lucky. So we had that whole financial backing and all the fees that were cut, and the number of times, as high as Sheikh Hamdan went up and said, we're going to do this. And it doesn't always make sense to everybody what these announcements are, but people in our industry and other industries that were affected, it meant life or death, and that's something I can't underplay. So that's how I can answer the question. So the fact that Dubai did so much to support us as a city, and again, this is a city, this is not a country we're talking about. This is a city behaving like a country. And that's what got us through the pandemic. We closed for dine-in for 1 month only. We were open for deliveries, so Deliveroo saved us from a delivery perspective and kept our salaries in check. We didn't lose any staff during this whole period. Like, everyone stayed 100% retention of staff. In fact, we hired more people because we're sending people to Saudi. We'll talk about that later. But if we were anywhere else in the world, I would not have a restaurant today, or an opportunity to grow that restaurant anywhere else. Honestly, like, if I had just started a restaurant during this time, it would have been a disaster. So that's where we are now. So I think I can say, without sounding too ridiculous, is that 2020, financially speaking, was actually better for us than 2019. And I think that is, a lot of reasons
That's
contribute
a
to that answer.
big statement,
Yeah,
my friend.
yep.
That is a
So
big statement.
that is a big statement. It is. I know it is, and I know it sounds crazy, but Dubai was going through a dip in the F&B and hospitality industry in 2018. Nobody liked to talk about it because we don't like to talk about these things, which I think is ridiculous, and we need to talk about these things.
Mhm.
2019 was starting to pick up a little bit towards the end. 2020, the first quarter was actually incredible, and then the pandemic hit us, so we had to pause for a month or 6 weeks to get things moving again. But I think once everything got back to a rhythm, if you will, so we're actually back in some kind of a move. Things progressed quite fast, and we got back on track relatively quickly. So what I was going to say, so it's really important to say that the role Dubai played in keeping us afloat is huge. Obviously, you can't save everybody. We were a very healthy business to begin with, so we were in a position to be saved or to be supported. Some other businesses were not as fortunate, and did not survive 2020, and that's normal, because in this business, it's such a cash intensive business that restaurants or venues rarely have more than a couple of months of working capital sitting in the bank. Rarely. So
Definitely.
if you're a nightclub in 2020, the odds of you coming back in 2022 are very slim, unless you're a nightclub that has other venues that could have survived. You're not coming back unless you're reinventing the wheel completely. You're starting from scratch. So again, we were lucky it was a restaurant, very lucky we were in Dubai. And for me, the team that I have, who are willing to sacrifice slightly longer hours, working under the threat of getting fined for being on the road during lockdowns to deliver food to people. So I don't think I say this enough, and I don't think people say it enough, but is there really a better industry than the F&B industry on earth? When I really
Well,
think about it,
some people
is
think
there?
that, well, I think, let's be honest, the how could I say it? After of myself gone through the trials and tribulation of fighting with a very traditional Chinese parents,
Yeah,
and not understanding, first of all, why did I pay so much money for my daughter to study in UK, and then she decided to be a waitress, uh, to then educating them what is Michelin star, etc. I, uh, I kind of gone through a fair bit myself
yeah.
from
So
a family trials and
yeah,
tribulation. So the my personal opinion on the formula is, we have to be damn crazy to start with. We
Well,
have to
that
be
it helps a lot. It helps
yeah,
a lot.
we have to be highly sociable beings, and then at the same time is we are as well very stubborn people. So we have to have this kind of like three pillars of attributes to
Yeah,
to
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 be
be
able to survive in this
qualified
business. Yeah, yeah, I
exactly
agree.
to qualify
I
into
agree.
this industry to start with. So
I
I
agree.
have to say, well done to you with really, I mean,
Thank
it is
you.
amazing to see. It is amazing to see and really hearing the fresh and blood of what things are happening. Now, before we go on to the topic of your expedition into the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, I really want
Yeah,
to
expedition
understand
is
is
correct. Yeah.
how how did you come up with the idea of an arcade bar and club into one space? I mean, stereo arcade. It's like come on. It's like you trying to turn a man cave into a money-making machine.
Um,
Correct me if I'm wrong.
I mean, you're almost there. Look, I've been, I- I'm not too stuck in the past, in general. I mean, I'm always thinking about what comes next, and I can't dwell on yesterday or last week. The only place, except for one, I make one exception for being stuck in the past, and that's when it comes to music. So, I grew up in Saudi in the 80s and the 90s, and then I moved to Lebanon, and then moved to Dubai. I didn't really have a an experience in that decade or that era for me to understand what it was like. So
Mhm.
my creative outlet, if you will, or my greatest ideas have always come with a soundtrack attached to them. When I say that, I mean when I'm working on a concept, I'm always listening to music. I never work on a concept in silence. There's always a soundtrack to what I'm doing, and it actually helps me develop things. So I've been a gamer my whole life since, I mean, I was always an athlete and I was always a gamer. These were the two things that defined me as a kid growing up. So, and I still am a gamer and to some extent an athlete. Obviously I'm 40, not like, I can't play competitive sports like I used to. Um, so with Stereo Arcade, coming from the Republic experience, where I had with 80s and 90s music and there was already that kind of vibe and I already had that kind of clientele. Um, with stereo, I wanted to create or open the club or the bar that I would have opened if I was a 30-year-old in 1985 or 1988. And with all the knowledge that I have and all the hindsight in the world of what really happened in the 80s and what we took from that era, I came up with Stereo Arcade. And believe it or not, I was sitting at my pool, literally sitting at my pool in my what I lived in a hotel and the address in Dubai Mall, and I was sitting on a sunbed with my laptop, and I was just listening to synthwave music, specifically, retro wave, synthwave, and I was thinking about what to do with a space that Daniel, he's still my consultant now, and everything has to do with kitchen design. But back then, he was my operations manager at Republic, had found for us in JBR. And I was thinking, would I build a bigger Republic or would I just do something that I've always wanted to do? And it's incredible what you can do when you're sitting alone with your thoughts, with absolutely no interruption, nobody around you giving you feedback. And I think I cracked the concept in 10 minutes and I started writing and writing and writing and writing. And I started putting a mood board together and I had it ready in an hour. Like in 1 hour, Stereo Arcade was born with the name, with kind of the identity that I wanted. I knew everything that it was going to be. And I knew exactly the brand I was going to create, and it's all because of the music I was listening to. Just put me in that kind of in that vibe, and you know, um, I grew up on arcades. All Most of my friends grew up on arcades, and it's human nature to reminisce and think of better times. And most people, when they think of the best times or their better times, they think of the times when they had very little responsibility, because that's what defines being an adult is being responsible. So the last time you were irresponsible, and I don't mean irresponsible like you didn't have responsibility. I mean you were irresponsible. You set a tree on fire like I've done in the past by accident, and then that's that kind of irresponsibility. When I was a kid, that was that era for me, is when I went to the arcades, because what was my biggest problem back then? I ran out of quarters or reals or whatever it was. That's my biggest concern. Playing basketball, my biggest concern was, somebody kicks the ball, or somebody hits the ball somewhere and it goes out of the court and down into some valley somewhere in the mountains in Lebanon. We used to go in the summer. So if you recreate that ambient, and people walk in, and the first thing they see and hear is an arcade, it's going to bring back crazy memories, and it's going to take them back to a time where the idea of getting dressed up and going to a nightclub and having a drink didn't exist. So you're almost giving them a fantasy.
True, true. That is true.
So that's why it happened. And I wanted a rock bar on the right because I've always, I was a musician, well, musician, quote unquote. I played the triangle professionally. I'm kidding. I didn't. Nobody plays the triangle professionally. I used to sing in a band for like just a pop up. But I wanted a rock bar because Dubai was lacking a real rock bar. Everything was just covers. One band doing 7 nights a week of covers and covers and covers. People that are wasted. I wanted a place where bands can come play original music. We invested so much money in that making that happen. And then the club only opened on weekends, and the club was just an 80s and 90s Tron synthwave masterpiece. Um, so yeah, that's basically it in a nutshell. And look, Peggy, at the end of the day, there's only so much you can do to create something. At the end of the day, once you open those doors, it's no longer yours. I
That is
never owned
very
Stereo
true.
Arcade. It's the people that came in there and danced and had a good time and sang along to the music, that met other people, got married, got divorced. I don't know what they did in there, but that's what makes the place what it is. And when a place has those kinds of stories, it has some kind of a soul, and that's why some places survive and do well, some places don't. And I think customers could feel that, which is why they kept coming back. And then in 2018, the whole market fell off a cliff, and we were part of that market, so we fell off a cliff too. In 2019, we shut it down, basically.
Mm. But
Yep.
after this whole trials and tribulation of making your man cave into your
Yeah.
reality,
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
just gonna because that was exactly the feeling when I got in there. I was like, I went
Yeah.
in with my husband, and my husband's like, "Man, that was like my teenage dream, man."
Yeah. There you
I
go. See,
said,
it's a fantasy.
exactly. Yeah, it is.
Yep.
So, but would you resurrect it? How would you resurrect it if you have the opportunity?
So I do have the opportunity to open another nightclub right now. Have several interesting opportunities. Let's put it that way. I just don't know if I have enough mental energy to do that. Do everything else I'm doing with Akiba Dori at the time.
Mhm,
Currently with the kind of regional and hopefully global expansion.
mm.
Um, but I know exactly what I would do. I already know, like 100%. Like if you see me coming up with another club, I'll tell you right now in this conversation, I know exactly what it would be like. The only major difference is there's going to be a huge dinner element this time around, and not just dancing and drinks. So that's where I would make my concept a little bit more mature. But I know exactly what I want to do if I end up doing another nightlife venture. Yeah,
Okay, so we getting into the mood, setting you back into the kingdom of
yeah,
Saudi Arabia.
hmm
What an expedition, as you said, and as I said.
hmm hmm
Walk me through this whole idea of, because as per my last interview with Saad, I mean, Japanese cuisine is a cuisine that is very popular in the region, I would say, or in the world.
hmm
And
hmm
there is a lot of different interpretation, shall we put it that way.
hmm
And with your brand is also one of the interpretation. It kind of reminds
correct.
me when I was little, like you said, we're 80s kids. I remember the
Yeah,
first time I went to Japan. That was 1989. That was the first time my mom and dad took me to Tokyo for a holiday, and I never forget the experience. And seeing some of the decor, some of the vibe that you're trying to perceive, it gives me that type of feeling. So, Saudi, bringing your brand in, walk me
yeah,
through the thinking, the trials, the
yeah,
tribulation, the tears, the
yeah.
anxious, everything. Spill me the beans, please.
Sure. So, I mean, I grew up in Saudi. I spent the first 15 years of my life in Riyadh, and it was a completely different world to what it is today. But I mean, growing up there made me the way I am because I was fortunate enough to go to the American school, um, which felt like you just ripped a plot of land out of somewhere in Pennsylvania or upstate New York, or and you dropped it in Riyadh, because it was an incredible school. I mean, my friends make fun of me for always saying
Oh.
it was the best school in the world, but I mean, it was amazing. I mean, I was this teenage kid wearing whatever I wanted, growing my hair if I wanted to, wearing Nirvana t-shirts if I wanted to, and nobody said anything. Then when I moved to Lebanon, I couldn't have long hair and I couldn't wear shorts to school. So I was like, what is this backwards country? And this is coming from Saudi, where my mom had to wear a abaya all the time. She hated it, but that's a different story. So, obviously, I always wanted to do something in Saudi ever since I was a kid, because I remember thinking, wow, these guys like have amazing. I mean, there's an amazing appetite in KSA for food. But when I grew up there, like the best restaurant we had was a place called the Shogun, which is a Japanese restaurant in one of the hotels, or Gulf Royal Chinese, which was actually still remains my favorite Chinese restaurant ever. I mean, I'm obsessed with it. I think Chinese is probably my favorite cuisine. Like the Chinese that I know, obviously, I've never been to China, so I can't comment on local Chinese cuisine. Um, but like those were the restaurants. So you didn't really have concept restaurants. You had like a hotel built by some guy who didn't really care about what the food was going to be. It's like, oh, we're going to do some teppanyaki tables here. That's going to be the concept. So it was like a Saudi Benihana. So, and then McDonald's opened, and then there was like queues for 2 days, and it was crazy. So that's what I grew up with. I mean, I didn't grow up with a fully functioning F&B ecosystem or a society where people like, went to different restaurants every week. We lived on a compound. There were restaurants on the compound. We ate food at school most of the time. We did brunches on weekends, and believe me, the brunches in Saudi are not like the brunches in Dubai, because that's a brunch. That's like where you go eat. Dubai is not where you go eat, so a completely different
It's where
experience
you
going
go
from
drink.
brunch to brunch.
Yes, it's
Yeah,
different.
that's it. That's literally all
Yes.
you do. There's no point calling it a brunch. Just call it day drinking. Um,
Yes.
so those were, and I always had very fond memories of food in Saudi, because the few restaurants that we did have were actually really, really, really good. And we traveled a lot when we were kids, like traveled a couple of times a year, so we never really spent a full year in Saudi. So we got to experience different countries: Europe, the US, the Middle East, Asia. So we went Asia, not Asia actually, but Asia, I went there later. Um, and um, and I always had this like kind of very special relationship with food. And once I opened Akiba Dori, it was the first time I had something that I could take back to Saudi. I wasn't actively looking, but a friend of mine who worked for a big company here was like, "Listen, we're working on this deal in Jeddah. Maybe we should put you guys forward." I'm like, you know what? I'm not really ready yet, because only a year into Akiba. I'm like, but if they give us some time, I will be ready, because I didn't want to open a brand. I don't want to open a branch of Akiba Dori until I know what I'm doing.
Mm.
Because you open it, then you evolve it, then you adapt it, then you change, then you add, and you remove. So it's a whole process. And I wasn't ready to just go in there after year one. So now Akiba Dori is 3 years old. We signed this agreement back in 2019, but obviously 2020 for the opening. So it would have been 2 years after opening in Dubai. And yeah, the pandemic happened, and Saudi's been very difficult to do any work in during the lockdowns and the constant changes. So it was really not a user-friendly experience, if you will, for someone that's used to Dubai. But then again, Dubai kind of spoils you for the rest of the world, because everything's so easy here. It's actually easier to deal with the government here than it is to deal with private organizations. Like the public sector is easier to deal with than the private, and that's not many countries can claim that. Not many cities can claim that. Well, the UAE in general, it's easy to deal with the public sector.
Hmm.
So we will be opening Jeddah in the next couple of months. I think maybe by October we should be open. And we also signed Riyadh, which that should be opening in November, which is very quick, I know. But like I spent the last 3 weeks when I was away working on the concept and the design for the
You are trying to do
Riyadh
this
branch.
one stone kill two birds strategy?
Yes, because we're sending the team anyway. We're recruiting for Saudi anyway, and it's been such a nightmare getting half my team are in the Philippines. They went back because they were supposed to go to Saudi, and they got stuck there. And don't even get me started on
Mm.
the red tape
Mm.
with agencies out of the Philippines and the labor office, and how, I mean, it's really been very stressful for my staff, not for me only. I mean, for them, because they've been sitting there
Mm.
waiting for months and months. And so I will say the most stressful thing about doing business in KSA for restaurants is staffing. mean, anybody can tell you anything. Everything else is easy. Setting up a company is easy. Suppliers, everything else is super simple. Staffing is very complicated because you're dealing with other governments and other countries that don't necessarily want to give you what you want just for the heck of it. And there's a lot of under the table stuff, and there's a lot of red tape, and it's very exhausting. I mean, it's just such a waste of time and resources. But I got really lucky with the partners we found in Saudi, who have now signed a master franchise for KSA. So they're going to open a couple of more. And they've been, super helpful, kind of guiding us through the process. But Saudi still has a long way to go in terms of kind of getting options for people there. There is a big boom of F&B. There are less and less franchises, which is always a healthy sign. I started to see that flip in Dubai maybe 7 years ago or 6 years ago, where homegrown brands started to
Mm,
pop up on the scene and people were interested in going to them and they were doing really well. 10 years
mm,
ago, were there any homegrown brands in Dubai that did well, like really well? Very few, or they were just cafes and like
mm,
uh, one shop restaurants. So Saudi's coming along nicely. Complete opposite of Kuwait. Kuwait is all about homegrown concepts, and they have a very mature hospitality market. I think probably one of the best in the region. Um, yeah, so it was interesting going back to Saudi. Obviously, like I said, I grew up there. So going back to Jeddah, going back to Riyadh, seeing my old neighborhood, talking to some friends who still live there. It's definitely an experience, and I think it's getting better and better and better. It's getting more efficient, if you will, because change sometimes takes time. Well, it always takes time, but in the case of Saudi Arabia, I mean, some things happened overnight, and it's very rare for a country to go through those kinds of changes in like 24 hours, but they did. So kudos to them on that. Obviously, I mean, that takes a lot of power to be able to do something like that and convince people that this is the right thing if they've been used to something for years and years and then you're changing it. So obviously everyone's very happy about that. So I think Saudi will be one of the new frontiers for hospitality. I think a lot of people are rushing in there because they think they're going to be too late if they take their time. I don't think the idea of too late exists because your timeline is very different than the next person's timeline. I think assuming that there's a window of opportunity, to quote George W. Bush before he went to war and messed up, Iraq and Afghanistan simultaneously, maybe not the right forum for this conversation. But I think the window doesn't close. It's your mind that closes. So if somebody says, "Oh, it's too late," it's not too late. How can it be too late? That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. If things were too late, there would be no new business and there'd be no new innovation ever. Um, so I think only go there when you're ready. If you're a franchise, you have a franchise manual, you have the team, you have the training, you found the right staff, you were able to train them. Because if you're going to go open in Saudi and find people locally who don't know anything about your restaurant, who've never worked in your kitchen, who don't know your recipes properly, who are going to be doing things on a remote learning perspective, people are not going to buy into it. There's a lot of really good quality in Saudi right now. There's a lot of really, really good restaurants, and there's a lot of really, really bad restaurants, like in any city. But there's definitely an opportunity, and I think it's not going anywhere anytime soon. In fact, I think we're not even starting. We're not even seeing the start of the F&B opportunity in KSA. I think everyone thinks, again, because we're such a small community here, they think, oh, it's very oversaturated. I mean, the population is insane. The amount of money being spent on restaurants and cafes in the kingdom was $1 billion a month average. $1 billion. It's not like this is not a market that's going anywhere. This is going to get bigger and bigger. So I think that's there's a lot to look forward to there from that perspective.
wow, a lot of information to absorb. But
Yeah.
let's look at it. As you said, you waited for your brand to mature into its third birthday. So it's
Hmm.
almost like seeing your kid from crawling now starting to walk. Hooray! It
Yep.
will start feeding
Exactly.
itself soon.
Oh, hooray! And then no. It's fear and joy at the same time. Yeah.
So, how do you see the operation now? obviously now you have your, as you said, all the trials and tribulation in getting the license is easy, but getting the talents,
Hmm.
getting your staff over there has been difficult.
Hmm.
The operation that you have in Dubai, how do you see that will different, and how are you modifying or localizing it to your audience in the kingdom?
So again, it's really important to remember that the general public in Saudi Arabia is very well traveled, even if they just travel locally, because it's such a huge, beautiful country. There's so many things to do. So they've had all sorts of experiences, from super, fast casual to quick service to delivery to fine dining to hotel room service. They've had it all. So there's nothing. You're not bringing them anything new. What I will say that I'm going to be doing, definitely the same strategy that we do in Dubai, which is our value for money and our value proposition is going to be the same. So we're going to be serving. I'm going to use one example. One of our dishes, which is one of our best-selling dishes, we're going to be selling it for half the price that a kind of competitor sells it for in Jeddah and Riyadh,
Mm.
and we have double the quantity in our portion. So in effect, someone is going to be paying one fourth what they would pay in that other restaurant for a much better product in Akiba Dori. The way we can make that happen is that, one, we're not a franchise, so I'm not paying licensing fees and franchising fees and royalties and marketing fees to anybody. And two, we're happy with a smaller margin, because what's the point of making amazing food if no one can eat it? Restaurants are not there for the critics. Restaurants are there for customers. They're there for the people. It's great when you get a good review. It's fantastic. But that's more like a morale thing for the staff. No one is not going to go to a coffee shop or to a restaurant because they read one guy hated the bread basket. Oh, worst bread basket ever. Never go to this Italian restaurant. Everyone's like, oh, okay, we're never going there. That's not how the world works. As nice as it is to a lot of restaurants to be in the Michelin guide and get a Michelin star, ultimately 90% of the customers don't really look at these things, because the world is made of tastes. People like certain things, people hate other things, and that's just the way it is. So the only thing we're adapting is like I said, in Saudi, is that everything's Arabic. So we're fully localizing Akiba Dori. So menus are in Arabic, our social media will be in Arabic. There will be some English in there as well, obviously. I mean, Jeddah, we're like 2 roads down from where the Formula One's going to be held. So obviously we'll have both, but we're making Akiba Dori and KSA really like talk to the local community. And everyone speaks 2 languages there, but they're just more confident and more comfortable with Arabic. And that's just how it is. If you go to Lebanon, everyone speaks French and English and Arabic. So you have to do 3 languages to get around. So we're localizing the language, if you will, and the brand from that perspective. But our menu will be the same. It'll be 75% the same. We're developing a 25% different menu for KSA. We do that in all our branches. So once we open the 2 other branches in Dubai and the third one in Abu Dhabi, the menus will not be identical. There will be changes, so people don't feel like they're getting the same experience everywhere they go. It's 75%, 80% the same, but that 20% might make a big difference to people. So yeah, so that's the major change for KSA, is the localization of the menu, of the vibe, of the brand, of the voice of the brand. The Jeddah space is beautiful. It's stunning. It's 8-meter ceilings. Riyadh is going to be amazing as well. We're opening on the boulevard. It's an incredible, incredible location. So we'll keep our service quality the same as it is in Dubai. That's why Andy, who was our manager in D3, is actually moving to Saudi. One of our floor supervisors, is also moving to Saudi. Mike, our sous chef, he's our number 2 guy in the kitchen for 3 years. He's going to be the head chef in KSA. So I'm sending my guys, like I'm sending my team there. Ed, she was our also a floor supervisor. She's also going there. Yeah, so we have I'm sending my A team to KSA. I want to make sure people get the best experience possible, which means we're hiring a
So,
lot of people in Dubai.
question now,
Hmm.
as your one stone cube, two bird mode, to have your two kingdoms outlet opening within
Within
a
weeks of
lightning
each other.
speed of exactly.
I mean, that wasn't
How
the
are,
plan. We had to adapt the plan, obviously, because
but
Jeddah was
how,
supposed to
but
open last year.
Well, now you have your game plan shifted. So, between
Exactly.
this game plan shifting, how are you seeing the market temperament or the landscape between the two biggest cities in the kingdom? How are you seeing the appetite difference between the two?
So I wanted to go into Jeddah first because everyone runs into Riyadh. So I thought if I go into Jeddah, establish a base there, people get to know the brand, it'll be much easier to go into Riyadh. So now we've been coming soon for 2 years or a year and a half. So people know about us now in Saudi. So it's crazy building a brand on waiting. You see the messages we get from on social media from people in Jeddah. So so here's how you have to look at Riyadh and Jeddah. If I grew up in Riyadh, so when we went on vacations in the kingdom, we normally went to the sea. We went to the Gulf. We went to the Arabian Sea. We went to Jeddah, Khobar, Dammam, Jubail. So we went to all the resort towns, if you will. Jeddah is one of those resort towns. So a lot of the Riyadh customers that we will have, will odds are vacation at least once a year in Jeddah or have done it for a long time. Jeddah people vacation outside of the kingdom because they have everything they want. They have the mountains close by. They have the beach right there, the sea right there, the Gulf right there. So for them, they leave. They go to Dubai. They go to Europe or whatever it is. So it's simple. It's in a way, it's very simple, but in a way, it's also very complicated now that we're opening them like a couple of months apart. So the whole building the brand in Jeddah thing had to be rejigged to okay, we have a month to get famous in Jeddah and then go open in Riyadh. So hopefully that happens. We'll see. Yeah, we will see.
You're sounding, you're skating on a very thin ice at that
Oh, for
moment, but with
sure.
a huge
Constantly,
confidence.
constantly, constantly, constantly.
But this is fantastic. Now, as per what you said, Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, bringing your childhood memories with your adulthood ambition, and everything is
Hmm.
rolling into one with this open. And
Hmm.
you said there are more expansion to come. And
Yes.
you briefly mentioned Kuwait. Am I seeing that in the horizon
I
or
don't think
or
Kuwait for
or
now. No, some other one other GCC country, and then North Africa.
interesting?
These
North
are the two
Africa.
that are yeah. These are the two that are moving, and eventually Europe. I'll probably talk about that another time. But Europe is not all of Europe, Western Europe specifically, and specifically one country that we're very close to finalizing. And I was just in well, the family and I and a bunch of friends. We were all over Western Europe for a couple of weeks. We were in Italy, France, Switzerland, and I was in Paris. I went to a couple of amazing Japanese restaurants. I picked one, and uh, it's very humbling to see the quality that we have here in Dubai versus. I mean, Paris. Anyone can argue it's one of the best cities in the world for food. Maybe Barcelona's up there. Tokyo is definitely the best city among the best three in the world for food. New York, London, but after this trip, and I went to some of the best restaurants in all these cities, like from Geneva to Lausanne to Paris to Milan. And if I compare the best cities in these cities, the best restaurants in these cities, some of the best restaurants in Dubai, I gotta tell you, I'm not just saying that because this is home, but like really, Dubai's come a long, long, long way. I mean, from a service perspective, from a quality perspective, from a taste perspective. I mean, we're up there. People don't realize it yet because I think they need to travel again and remember what it's like not being here. But Dubai is making its way up like big time, and I think Abu Dhabi is going to follow very soon as well. That's another conversation. But Abu Dhabi is working on some really ambitious
Interesting.
projects. Yeah.
Interesting. I think
Yep.
you and I, when we go offline, one of these days, you and I'll take you to China, and then we go for a spin, and you
Done.
will see
I'm down. I'm
what is
down.
the difference. What is the
I'm
difference? We need to go for a
done.
spin. We need to go for a spin.
Yeah. Sure. Sure.
Now,
Sure.
I think back to this whole conversation. Now, you obviously going through all the ideas, and now with such and congratulations to you with the Kingdom's
Thank you.
expedition, with all the other future up and running and happening.
Thank you.
Let's take it back just a step. You know, now you've seen the trends, the peaks and troughs of the region, as well as in
Hmm.
Saudi so far, with all this setting up, especially when it comes to customer experience. Now, what do you
Yeah.
see is the enduring trend that are the core of, almost like a tip to the viewers? What is the core values that helps a business to survive? Now, as you said, once the door open, the brand is not yours, but you as a brand owner and you as the operator, there has to be a certain attribute to keep this customer experience and to keep the vibe going. What is your opinion on that?
Well, you hear this a lot from people. Um, and this is the unfortunate reality of a restaurant when it kicks off and it's doing well, and then they kind of plateau. So the one thing I never wanted to hear about Akiba Dori or anything that I've done, like, or anything I will do in restaurants is, oh, it was amazing, but the last time we went, it wasn't that great. And I know why these things happen, and people know why these things happen. It becomes about making as much money as possible and as fast as possible and getting out. And that's unfortunate because restaurants
It's not a
have a
cash machine.
huge. No, I mean it can be, but I'm saying it's the third space. It's where people meet outside of their intimate surroundings. So no one goes to the cinema, to the movies to meet with people. You go to a restaurant, you go to a bar, you go to a coffee shop. That's where you go. So you go to the third space, and we're part of that third space. No one goes, "Oh, hey, I'll meet you in the museum, or I'll meet you at an art gallery." Nobody. I mean, this is movie stuff. Nobody does that. People meet at places with food and drinks. That's it. That's why I'm saying it's one of the greatest industries on the planet, because through all of this, after, especially after coming out of a pandemic, the first place people rushed to was restaurants. They didn't rush to the cinemas. They didn't rush to concert venues. They rushed to restaurants, cafes, bars. That's where they want to be. They want to be around other people. We're social animals. That's the whole point of being in communities. And the reason the human race survived is we learn how to live in communities and build them and communicate with each other. So um, I think the most important part of specifically the hospitality business is the hospitality. If you don't treat your customers with the best, give them the best level of service, and you don't treat them like you are there to please them, you're in the wrong business. You're not in the put my nose up in the air business and, oh, we're too full, sorry. And I didn't even want to take reservations at Akiba Dori in the beginning, but then we had to take some reservations. But as long as your obsession is with the quality of service that you're giving people, and that you don't change that because it's more cost effective and then that hurts your business, you're going to be fine. If you're in the right location, you have a good kind of PR, the media likes you, likes your brand, likes to talk about you, because that's like one of the main factors that people just completely ignore. And they think the media is like 50% of the game. If you're not in the media, you're nowhere. So as long as you focus on pleasing your customers and making sure that they leave satisfied, they leave happy, they don't feel like you've changed on them. It's like a relationship, right? At the end of the day. So you have to just work on it. You can't just say, "Oh, this person comes back every other day. Why should I bother doing anything special for them? They're coming anyway." And that used to be the mentality of a lot of people. A lot of people that have failed at this business have failed because of that lack of that hospitality. It's called the hospitality industry. I mean, you can't take that word out of it and call it anything else. It's a hospitality industry. If you're not in that business with that mentality, odds are you're never going anywhere. There's a very, very big reason the Lebanese were so amazing at F&B and hospitality, because it's part of the culture. It's the culture in Lebanon to be hospitable, to see a stranger and offer help, or to invite people to your house that you've never met. It's part of the culture. Everyone else outside of that culture, we used to find it very strange that the Lebanese are like that. I mean, the Italians are the same. The French are not like that, for example. It's a culture thing. So people that have to go against the grain to be hospitable, those guys work the hardest. So the UAE is known for its hospitality, for example, the basic hospitality. What I mean is being helpful. I'm not talking about hospitality to like 5-star. I'm talking about the basic, the essence of being in the hospitality industry. And Some countries have it, some cities have it more than other cities in the same country. So if you're in Dubai and you're Emirati or you're an expat that's been here your whole life, odds are you grew up in a very hospitable environment where people were kind to each other, where you went to other people's houses for dinners. I have friends that lived across the street from other families that never met them, and they grew up. So it's a culture thing. So if you're in a city that doesn't have the culture of hospitality, you're going to be working very hard to make that successful. If you're in a city that already has that culture, you just have to translate it, really. So if you obsess on the service and making sure your customers are happy with what you're providing them, and you don't change on them and suddenly start doing different things, which is what a lot of people do, a lot of restaurants and nightlife that you start doing, you'll be fine. Really, just treat everybody.
Fantastic.
Yeah, and you're good.
So, I always ask all my interviewer as a one last guidance beacon
Okay.
of the industry. If someone is wanting to venture into the industry, what are your words of advice? If you are offering your pointers to your fellow colleagues in the industry, what
I
will
would
be
say,
your word
yeah,
of advice?
I would say this applies to any industry, not just F&B, because at the base of it, it's still a business, and a business is a sum of a lot of moving parts, including your finance, your PR, your marketing, your service, your operations, everything all together. But ultimately, it's one thing for me, and that's the only thing I ever tell myself, tell other people if they ask me, and I don't get asked this question a lot. I know it sounds crazy, but nobody really. It's again, so where the culture comes in. The culture here is not to ask for help or to ask. People think it's a shame to ask, and I think the most successful people you will ever meet will tell you they picked up the phone and they asked, and there's nothing wrong with it. And these people that do ask, by the way, I love working with them. I love it because they're willing to pick up a phone and call a complete stranger and ask for advice. These people have no ego, they have no attitude issues, and everyone will love to see them succeed. Everybody. But people who kind of are like, no, I know, I don't need anybody, I don't need anything, and they try to do things on their own. It's very complicated. So the one thing I will say is there's always, in every scenario in business, a worst case situation or a worst case scenario. Always. So before you get into it, make sure you are comfortable and okay with that worst case scenario. If you're okay with it, then you can't fail. You can't. But if you're going into something with crazy expectations and it doesn't work the way you want, and you pack your bags and you leave, then you were not okay with the worst case scenario. So things will go wrong, things will go right, things will be up, down, left, right. You don't even know, million sides to the same story. If you're not okay with the worst that can happen, don't do it. Then find something you're okay accepting the worst case scenario in and do that. That's it. It's not even a
Fantastic.
bravery thing. It's just you have to mentally accept that things can get screwed up. That's it.
True. True. Well, thank you so much
Thank you for
to
having
be
me.
my